Yeah, you find me looking very, very out of place with my hat on, and I'm not taking my hat off because my hair looks awful. Looks worse than normal. Yes, I know. But the water where I am at the moment is incredibly soft, and it's just with the shampoo, it's just made my hair go like Yahoo Serious. Now there's the thing. Do you know who Yahoo Serious is? That's going back many, many years. But at the moment it's 32, well it's about 31 actually degrees, but it looks like we're in for a tropical storm. It looks very, very sunny out there, but believe me, it's come a lot overcast to where it was. So it's possible we're going to have a little bit of rain, which is interesting because yesterday I was in a sandstorm, and I had to wear a mask and everything. It was really, really interesting. Well, I thought it was really, really interesting. Anyway, if you haven't tuned in, assuming you have tuned in, of course, to hear me talk about sand and rain. So where I'm going to start this week's rant is with the last item I've written down on my little crib sheet, which I always keep to one side of me, which actually is, funny enough, over here at the moment. And that is the fact that I have been looking for a Roland A-110, A-110 to be precise, or 110, for a long, long period of time. And I have struggled to get my hands on one of these things. They are like gold dust. Now, there were, as far as I'm aware, I only made 2 different versions of this sort of particular functionality of the unit. There was a unit called an MKS 900, and then there was a unit called the A110. And the MKS 900 was slightly more functional than the MKS. Sorry, I got that wrong way around. The MKS 900 was slightly more functional than the A110. But either one did the same function what I'm after. Effectively, along the front of the panel of these units, which is a 1U high unit, there is a keyboard, and that keyboard has a light for every key on it. Okay, you put the MIDI in, so you run the MIDI into the unit, and then the MIDI out of the unit to your target sound module, and it will tell you what notes are being depressed on the controller and what channel those notes are being sent on the controller. So if you can't get your tone module, if you're not sure whether your tone module is receiving the MIDI correctly, you can effectively use this to debug that. It's an incredibly useful tool when you're running legacy MIDI tech, which, as a lot of you know, I do in the studio. I have a lot of legacy MIDI tech. I have USB tech as well, but I have a lot of legacy MIDI tech in there as well. And I've been looking for one of these things for ages and ages and ages, and so far I've managed not to be able to find one. This week, not only did I find one, I found 2. I am absolutely wrapped because I've managed to acquire 2 of these within, the last 14 days. I am really, really seriously happy with that fact. So, it just becomes rain. I'm in paradise and it's raining. Hey. Anyway, so I've managed to find 2 of these. Now, there were a number of units that Roland did around this time, and I'm not sure I know all of them. But the 3 that actually have sprung to mind that I have on my bucket list, my wish list to acquire, are the A110, which I've now got 2 of, which I'm really happy with. The A880, which I had 2 of. I had a continental version, I had a UK version. So I've kept the UK version. I sold the continental version on, so somebody else could use that. And the 3rd unit that I'm after is the A220, which is a MIDI splitter. So what does that mean? Well, effectively what that means is it's playing, it allows you to split the MIDI signal and send the upper half of the keyboard to one sound module and the lower half of the keyboard to another sound module. And you can do that on a channel by channel basis. So effectively, if you had 16 channels on MIDI with 16 channels of information, you could split the upper and lower portions of those channels and send them off to route them off to different tone modules. Now, it's extremely useful if you're running a legacy keyboard where you can't put split points in. And some of the older keyboards that I have, you can't put split points in. You either play the keyboard or you don't play the keyboard. It's as simple as that. So if you want to put a split point in and send the lower half on one channel and the upper half, you can't do that. This unit allows you to do that, and that's really why I'm after it. I just want one of them because I've got a couple of scenarios where I have tried to split it and you end up having to play it into the computer and then out of the computer and use the computer to split or do a channel shift in the computer. Now, that's okay. The problem is that you can actually run into latency issues when doing that rather than playing it straight from there into the unit itself. And again, it comes back to a video I did a long time ago about daisy chaining MIDI. You know, the more daisy chains you have in the MIDI or in the signal being sent, the more opportunity you have for latency to be introduced into the system. So I am absolutely stoked, and I'm still looking for an A220, and at some point I may find an A220 as well. So that means I've now got the hardware controlling equipment. These things don't make any noise, but they're just really, really useful to have in your bucket of equipment, especially if you're running legacy tech like I do. The next thing I'm going to go on to, and this sort of jumped out and split me this week. I have put a number of machines that I've had in the studio that have been sitting up against the wall in the studio back into storage, just to give me a little bit more space. One of the machines I put into storage was the A-110 I, which was the big MIDI controller that I bought a few weeks back. Now, I've been playing with the A-110 I, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a really interesting keyboard to get your head around about how it works. But it's really interesting. But what it led me to think about was, when you buy a keyboard, do you just buy the keyboard? Now, I know that when I buy a keyboard, I don't just buy the keyboard. When I buy a keyboard, I buy a dust cover for the keyboard, so to make sure that it stays as nice for as long as possible. And also, I don't really want dust getting into the machine. It just, over the time, it gets onto contacts, and that causes a problem. And especially if you work in a dusty environment. So you want to. I put a dust cover on it. I buy a dust cover. I have them custom made for my keyboards, but you can just buy them online. Typically, you will buy pedals for the keyboard because, believe me, trying to unplug pedals from one place to another is really a nightmare, especially if you're gigging. If you're gigging, you want dedicated pedals for the keyboard that you're particularly talking about. You typically might buy hardware memory cards. Now, I know on my Jupiter 8, my System 8, there's an SD card, and you can save all the patches to the SD card. That's actually great. If you're gigging, fantastic. You have a selection of SD cards in a little wallet with all your patches on them, and when you come to do the gig in the evenings, or whenever, you plug it in the back, you load it up from SD card, job done, you're ready, good to go. Fantastic idea. And I'm a big fan of having hardware or being able to load from memory cards or that sort of thing. I think it's where we've gone wrong in recent times, if you ask me, because we rely on things coming down from computers. Now, with legacy tech, it takes some time because the speed at which the transfer rates work on older pieces of equipment is quite slow. So, if you're restoring, for argument's sake, when I was doing the Korg work, when I was restoring the Korg T1, you could be talking anything 5 minutes plus for, it to reload the sysx file for the keyboard, which, if you're out in the, gigging, that's a long time to have to stop and wait if you have a problem. Whereas a memory card, put it in the back of the machine, press initiate, seconds, and you've got the patches back. Anyway, moving on. And then the last thing that I always buy for a keyboard is a case. And this is the bit that really sort of triggered me to actually be saying this now. It's because I watch the user groups and the forums, and quite often one of the things that comes up on there is, Joe Smo has bought a keyboard and says, so, how do you carry your keyboard to gigs? And I sit there thinking, in a case. And then you get people come back and they say, oh, they go and buy a padded case. And I've actually seen this. So you've just gone off and bought a $3,000 keyboard, you know, and you're going to put it in a padded case, and then you're going to throw it in the back of the band's van. You're mad? Really? Are you mad? It's a $3,000 keyboard. Are you mad? But people are doing that, and there are cases out there that are made for these keyboards, you know, at $2,000 and $3,000. That the bag might cost you $50 to $100, but it gives you actually virtually no protection at all, especially if you're in a gigging environment. Now, moving up from there always used to be the fibre cases. Now, I haven't seen fibre cases for a long time, but when I was playing, we used to have the mixer in a fibre case. The fibre case had foam in it. The mixer sat in there quite nicely, had a lid with foam on it, and it had top connections, so you plugged your power and everything else went into the top of the mixer. And that worked really well for us, because you would turn up, you'd leave the mixer actually in the fibre case, and then you plug all the bits and bobs into it, and it protected that mixer for years and years and years. We never had any issues with that mixer whatsoever, and I think that was purely because it sat in this fibre case. And fibre cases are okay for smaller pieces of equipment. I think, you know, the strength of a fibre case, especially if you've got lots of foam in there, is perfectly adequate. I just don't see them anymore. I mean, I don't know whether it's because companies don't make them anymore, or just I've not been looking for them. There used to be a company called ADDA, Adder. They used to keep these things for everything, every use you can imagine. So, you know, I suppose, you know, if you're thinking about, I don't know, like a drum machine, a TB303, or, you know, that sort of size of equipment, or maybe the boutique series, you know, a fibre case would be actually quite adequate for those, keeping them safe while in transit. And then you move up to the next one, which was the wood case. Okay, and I've got a few of those sitting in my storage unit for keyboards that I've acquired over the years, and don't need to change them. They're perfectly adequate. They keep the keyboard perfectly safe. Very heavy though. One of the things I know about the wood case is they're very, very heavy. And typically these things were made of wood. They had hard plastic end stops on them to stop the ends from getting bashed. And you ended up having to replace those every so many years, because eventually they would split and disintegrate. And they tended to be lined with a sort of combination of foam and fluffy material in riotous colours like electric blue and electric red and pink. And you've all seen them if you go on eBay and look at people selling with case or selling the cases, and you see inside of these things. And again, they protected the keyboard quite well. But if you're going to go and spend $3,000 on a keyboard, the only case to go and buy is a flight case, a proper flight case. And I've just done that for the A80. I've just bought a proper flight case for the A80. It is aluminium and rigid plastic. It actually is incredibly light, funny enough, in terms of picking this thing up and moving it around. It really is incredibly light. But the keyboard itself fits into the case beautifully. It really does fit into the case beautifully. So, and the protection this case will offer that keyboard is phenomenal. Now, I've had the keyboard case made with a little bit of additional space in it, which is the space for power cords, power leads, whatever you want to call them, pedals, that sort of stuff, so that all that can go into a separate little holder all within the keyboard space. And I think that will be it. It's perfectly good. So, you know, if you're going to go and spend $3,000 on a keyboard, you would be absolutely mad if you didn't spend $300 on a proper flight case for it. Now, I was going to do another piece, but I'm actually going to save that piece for next week probably. And the reason is, and that was, why would I not buy a piece of equipment? But I'm going to save that. I'm going to do that next week, because I think I've ranted for long enough now, and it is. And that pool does look inviting. So Let's talk to you next week. Take care. Bye.
If you like the contents of this video, please give it a thumbs up. Apparently it helps the channel and allows other people to find this video a lot quicker. I'm sure by now if you didn't like the contents of this video, you've already given me a thumbs down. If you want to be notified about future videos that are added to the channel, hit the subscribe button that should be appearing about here.